All right, the point of Psalm from this last week is Psalm 1, which if Tim Seleska was here, he'd probably tell you you should read all the Psalms in light of Psalm 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, Psalm 1. Blessed is the man who walks in the counsel, who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but they are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor the sinners in the congregation of the righteous. The Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. Let us pray. Lord Jesus Christ, we give you thanks and praise that you plant us like trees in streams of water through baptism. We thank you for the promise that you bring forth fruit from us by your word and sacraments. We ask that you bless us, bless your church, bless your campuses, the campus ministries you provide throughout the church to be places where trees can grow and flourish and produce much fruit. We thank you for all who have gathered here today. Bless our time together. Allow it to be positive, productive, pastoral, and for everybody to grow from it. We pray this in your holy and precious name. Amen. Just a couple announcements. So one announcement that came out the last time was this two-text conference. I just learned about it last minute, but Dr. Bartelt sort of shared it, and I got a chance to drive up to Mundelein, Illinois, and be a part of that with Dr. Veltz, Dr. Bartelt, Dr. Robbie, and a host of other people. It was fabulous, and I took 3 college students with me, and who were just interested in theology, and all cards on the table. One was my son and one was my nephew. But when they just sat and listened to good theology, you couldn't shut them up in the car all the way home. And so, sort of a lead into today, when we have good theology amongst college students, they actually want to talk about theology and about God and about how it plays out in the world. So, kudos to the two-text conference. I think the next year will be in
Thanks.
early June in Mundelein, Illinois, and if you would like to go, put that on your calendar. It was very good, so I highly recommend it. Also, I've had some ask about Greek and Hebrew. There are a number of online options. Alec Fisher will be doing. He has an institute he does, and he'll be doing Greek and Old Testament, Latin, and German. I'll be teaching online Hebrew, and Reverend Andy Cannell will be teaching online Greek this fall. So if you know anybody who wants to sharpen their skills, I know me and Andy's class are free. Or if you know any college students thinking about seminary who want to either go to seminary and get ready for it, or just want to learn Greek or Hebrew, anybody's welcome. Just shoot me a text and I'll start putting you on a list of a category, if you will, and we will get in contact with you or those people. So those are my announcements. Now I'd like to hand it over to today. Today is our topic. We went from last month, the Lutheran Confessions. Dr. Robert Kolb had a great dialogue with Dr. Pat Ferry on the Lutheran Confessions, how it affects us today. And today we want to go to a more practical topic. We want to talk about campus ministry. Campus ministry for me has been pretty important since, let's see, my sister, my brother, and myself all went to a Concordia. My dad went to Concordia. My cousin went to Concordia. All my in-laws went to Concordia. I have 2 sons. One's at Mequon and one is at Seward. So it's played a big role in our family. And I've seen it play a big role in friends of mine who are not Christian or not Lutheran. And it's been very important ministry. So today we have a number of panel guests who will dialogue and or talk with the Reverend Dr. Pat Ferry on the importance of campus ministry. So I'm going to be muting myself from now.
Mark, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Nice to see you. Wow, I just went to a different view here and see only myself. We switched real quick.
Sorry, I'm going to be trying to spotlight those who are on your panel and stuff, just to make it.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Yeah, thanks, Ben. Yeah, thanks for the chance to to lead the discussion again today. Mark's just testing my versatility, moving from Bob Kolb last time, talk about the confessions, to talk about campus ministry this time, but it's my pleasure to do it. And I'm really excited about the folks that we have joining us as panelists, but I want to emphasize that this is going to be much more of an open forum than we normally do. It's a rather large number of people who we've asked to weigh in on some of these questions, and we'll introduce them in just a moment, have them introduce themselves. But we'd like to have everybody participate with questions and interaction as we go along. So I have a list of about 8 or so folks who I think are here, and I'll just mention by name, and then if you want to go right to them, it looks like Ben's sorting them out here for us already. But Randy Duncan, why don't you start? Just introduce yourself. I'll go with the names I have, and then if we forget anybody, we'll add at the end. And just say who you are, where you're from, and what you're up to.
All right. Well, I'm Randy Duncan. I'm the campus pastor at Concordia University Ann Arbor, and this is my alma mater also. So it's a place I've loved for a long, long time.
Hi, Randy. Steve Smith.
Sure. I am Steve Smith. I've been at Concordia Mequon for 22 years. I was at Concordia Chicago for 7 years. So that makes most of my ministry in campus at the Concordias. So it's been a blessing.
And Ryan Peterson.
Hi, everyone. I'm a bit complicated today. I've actually served the past 11 years on the Ann Arbor campus of CUWAA. So my mailing address is still Michigan. I'm currently living in St. Paul, en route to being a part of the Concordia St. Paul team.
I'm also in Minnesota today, Ryan. Should have got together, but I'm leaving from here this afternoon. Jeff Leininger. Jeff.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Jeff Leininger. I served as the campus pastor at Concordia Chicago, River Forest, for 21 years. Was also the director of the pre-seminary program for about half that time. And supported church relations, did a number of things for the university. Now I'm just about a year back in the real world of the parish. I'm at First St. Paul's Lutheran Chicago, historic congregation on Chicago's north side. The documents for this founding of the Missouri Synod were signed here in 1846. And the congregation didn't join because they thought, it'll never work. So the congregation actually joined a few years later. Although I'm not technically in campus ministry, we still get a lot of Concordia students that worship here, as well as Moody Bible Institute students, as well as a number of people in graduate programs in the North Side, Loyola, Northwestern, and the other schools. So still feel like I'm kind of a little bit in campus ministry now.
Good to have you today, Jeff, too. And Ryan Matthias.
Yeah, I'm campus pastor at Concordia, Nebraska. Served 4 years in the parish in Davenport, Iowa, and then the last 16 here. I just got back from a trip in Europe and just tested positive for COVID this morning. So really excited, and that's how it goes.
Well, here we are on Zoom, so we're not, you don't
That's right.
intimidate us in the least. So thanks, Ryan. And James Wetstein. James.
Yeah, sure. So I've been at Valpo on the pastoral staff for over 20 years. Was in a parish in Gary, Indiana for 12 years prior to that.
Got some significant longevity among our panelists as we go around. Evan Gardner's joining us today too, and he's been part of our planning for this. Evan.
Yeah, I've been an adjunct at Concordia Ann Arbor for 11 years, and I've got the perspective of kind of being there on that campus, teaching Christian doctrine and other classes, and then being back in the parish and kind of seeing how the influence of both places changes how I do ministry in both places. I've really been invigorated as I teach, and going back into the congregation as I'm in a congregation again, invigorated. I just love the relationship that has existed in my ministry.
Thanks, Evan. And Sue Hasselring. Sue, please. Thanks for joining us today, Sue.
Yeah, hi. I am the ministry catalyst for International Student Ministry, and I was able to be part of a campus ministry long ago, both at a public university campus for 2.5 years and then at Concordia River Forest for 2.5 years. So it's really exciting to be able to join in and talk about the international perspective as well.
Great, and we're looking forward to all of that. So did I miss anybody else? I mean, lots of folks have had experiences on campuses, obviously, but am I missing anybody that we wanted to participate as a panelist, I guess, as it were? Again, others will be welcome to join in as we move along. But I thought it might be appropriate if we start to just begin with Randy. Randy, could you just say a little bit about Concordia Ann Arbor? I know folks are interested in what's going on. I know Dave Davis is joining us. Thanks, Dave, for being a part of this too. And if you would like to add anything as well, that would certainly be welcome. But maybe if just start with the situation, and then we can sort of dovetail into questions about campus ministry there.
Oh, the situation, well, we began the last academic year with record enrollment and just about every bed filled in our halls. And but by the beginning of the winter semester, we caught word in February, mid-February, that there was a financial crisis and that there's going to need to be some changes. And I think we're all aware of some of the uproar that happened with that. We were not too long after that, they came to the conclusion that we could possibly look at autonomy as an option, and that they were going to keep us basically the same as we've been past years for the 24-25 academic year. And so, and then just last week, it's all a blur right now, that found out that the bid for autonomy didn't go through. And so there's some more changes that are happening on our campus. A lot of struggle that we've had this past year. Great ministry opportunities. God is not wasting any of our pain, but it's not anything that we had anticipated.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Randy. And Ryan, too, I didn't mean to exclude you. You're no longer the payroll there, but anything you'd like to add by way of perspective there?
Yeah, I think Randy summarized it well. Certainly, it's a challenging time for students, and I'm not on the ground there anymore, so I don't have that perspective. But what I can relay, certainly from the past few months, is that those who have been involved, especially with students, faculty members, coaches, advisors, etc., they really made it their primary goal to do everything possible to serve students, to really lean in, to love them, to care for them, because, obviously for so many, this really came as an unexpected turn compared to what they thought the year would be.
Yeah, and I certainly want to commend both of you for the extraordinary work that not only you've done through the years, but in these kind of crisis months, and to all of your colleagues as well. It has been a time of extraordinary uncertainty, and students are the last to know what's going on, and you've cared for them, and I'm grateful for that. I'm also grateful, Dave Davis, for your leadership as Michigan District President. You've been a great advocate for Concordia Ann Arbor, and did so much, I think, to try to bridge the gap, the conversation between the leadership, administrative leadership, the Board of Regents, and to represent Concordia's Ann Arbor's interests during this difficult time. Would you like to say anything, Dave, about it from your perspective?
Yeah, I'm kind of just joining because I heard Randy was on here. I want to see what the heck Randy would have to say. I've said other things, other places. I'm going to say some other things. We're doing the best we can, trying to be faithful, trying to be constructive, but trying to speak into the system and into any number of issues that kind of coalesce around what we're experiencing at Concordia Ann Arbor. So, yeah, you have other topics today. So I'm glad to, if anybody ever wants to reach out to me and ask me things, I'm not trying to be silent. I just don't want to monopolize your time today here.
Well, we do want to thank you in this this venue for your leadership and for all that you've been doing. I mean, I obviously have a vested interest in it myself. I was part of that ministry for a long time, and I know that our charge to ourselves is to be positive and uplifting and charitable, and I will be that. But I would be remiss if I didn't indicate that I'm very disappointed personally in what has transpired. Don't understand it. Don't get it. I recognize that the leadership is not easy, colleges and universities these days, but a place like Concordia Ann Arbor is not the kind of place that's closing. Let's just put it that way. I mean, this was a school that was growing. It was on a very positive trajectory. It's been very clear that there is no financial emergency. So a lot of head scratching, and you know, my bald spot's wider than it was, but it's you know, it's troubling, and yet we're moving forward, and we're praying for you, Randy, especially as you do ministry in that setting in the months ahead. Let's turn specifically to the topic, and you know, I have a very soft spot in my heart for campus ministry. I'm a convert on a college campus. I guess in this company, I would like to be able to say it was that campus pastor who really played the key role, but frankly, he wasn't. I mean, I hardly knew the guy and rarely spoke to him. It had a lot more to do with other students and with you know, those saints that you're equipping who are reaching peers, with faculty members in their classroom, coaches, folks like that. And I'm sure our campus pastors will agree that a big part of their role is preparing others for leadership and for service and ministry. But in any case, it was had a very formative impact on me. It's something that I felt like I wanted all my life to be involved in some capacity. I was actually a campus pastor for a few years at the University of Wyoming before I took a call to teach history at Concordia, Wisconsin, and then subsequently became president. But everything I did, I really felt was sort of an extension of campus ministry, whether it was in the classroom or in administration, working with students. And in a place like our Concordias in Valpo, I mean, that's a very clear part of the mandate. On our campuses at other state and universities, you find a way to connect and to integrate. But it's a very rewarding, very challenging, and very different kind of ministry. And I'm really grateful for all of you who are or have been a part of it for a long time. I'd like to start with you, Steve. And I said I wasn't going to really ask specific questions to particular people, but I am going to ask a few. And Steve, you know, I mean, you've been at it as long as anybody, right? And on two different campuses. So what's changed in over the course of your tenure, you know, from when you started to you know, as you are where you have been in these last years? What's changed about campuses, about students, about climate?
Yeah, you know, everybody will be able to chime in too. I guess 1994 was my first year in campus ministry, which is quite a long time ago. So now I'm starting to get the children of people that I was their campus pastor, and then their children are in college now. So I've had that happen a bunch of times already. But you know, I guess if you can think back to the 90s, even as it follows societal trends, I think there was more connection with church across the board. And I find now more students coming that might identify themselves as non-religious background. But the thing that I find encouraging and great, and maybe you've had similar experience, is it doesn't mean that they're opposed. They wouldn't use the label atheist. It's just not in their background. And so that to me is kind of a fertile ground to be able to lay some nice seeds of the gospel. And I get to teach the basic doctrine class here. I've done that for over 20 years, every semester. And just great questions and opportunities to really to bring the gospel to bear in people's lives. So, you know, maybe people had more of a family connection back 20 years ago, 30 years ago even. But But now, yeah, it doesn't mean I don't think that they're not open. A lot of students aren't open to the gospel.
I guess I was a nun before my time. I went to Little Lutheran College, St. John's, Winfield. There weren't very many people like me on campus. There were a handful, athletes who were there for athletics, maybe a few local students. The old Concordia Milwaukee called them Swifts, commuters. But most everybody else was there because they wanted to be a church worker student, or they'd come from an LCMS background, their parents had attended. But that's not the rule anymore, right? I mean, and I don't think on any of our campuses is it necessarily unusual to find students who come from a variety of backgrounds, and not because of our LCMS mission. That would certainly be true at Concordia, Wisconsin, and Ann Arbor. Let me ask you, if you don't mind, Jeff. You followed Steve at Concordia Chicago, and tell me a little bit about what you think are some of the blessings and burdens of campus ministry. That's a topic we just bounced around a little bit last month, but I think it's an intriguing way to look at it. Blessings and burdens.
Yeah, following Steve Smith, that's a burden right there. No, I remember when Steve had been here 7 years when I started at River Forest, and I thought 7 years, oh my gosh, I mean, that is just impossible. And then 21 years later, I finally left. Blessings and burdens. For sure, anyone's going to talk about the students themselves being the blessing, to be involved in their lives. It's only 4 years. It's only 4 years, but what an impactful time. Patrick, as you mentioned your time, how impactful it was in that short amount of time. And I think about my time at Concordia St. Paul, even though I was raised in a strong Lutheran church worker family, but how incredible it was. And I think it was only 4 years, but it had this sort of lifelong impact on me. So impacting students at this time in life when their brains are literally still expanding, and they're being challenged by things. They're starting to learn about themselves in a way that they maybe haven't in the past, and that you get to be a part of that and speak into that and walk with them in it. I mean, that's probably the biggest blessing. I think also for my role in helping form future church workers, because I was also doing the pre-seminary program. Hey, Chris. Chris was in my program. And very involved in a lot of our Lutheran teachers and future church workers. The fact that you get to help train that next generation of people, and in a way have a larger impact than you might in other situations, because you're training the future leaders. And that's an amazing blessing. And then maybe the not as many as you might hope, but those that come to the faith, those that you get to baptize, those that you confirm. In my case, quite a few of them went on to church work. Patrick, like your sort of course, that they came and they met somebody, or they started dating somebody, or they got exposed to the gospel. And then in quite a few cases, I'm just kind of making this number up, maybe half of them or something, ended up like serving the church, going to seminary after coming as an atheist and hearing the gospel in the choir, or getting to know somebody and learning more, coming to chapel, and then ending up being a Lutheran teacher. I mean, that's just really amazing, and that happens way more than you might think. So those are some of the blessings, which I'm sure some of the other guys would resonate with. Some of the burdens with it, just personally, just the time. I'm sure that everybody's going to be like, yeah, it's just, how do you just expend the amount of time with such a diverse population? You've got some kids there that are uber Lutheran and they're studying philosophy and Hebrew, and then you've got other kids that are completely biblically illiterate, even though your own time to take care of all of this, and it's 1,000 of them, right? I mean, that was a tough thing. And then more recently, I think always these places are where the issues that we have in the church, whether it's worship or communion or the role of women, I mean, you can name the top 4 or 5 things. They're sort of amplified on these campuses. because you get people from all different perspectives in life, but then you get all the different Lutheran perspectives, and they have this extra energy to them on the campus. And so you try to navigate that with grace and charity, but you'll get a student from an LCMS background that's never opened a hymnal, and then you'll get one that's only known page 5 and page 15 of the hymnal, and they're both sitting there in chapel in front of you. And so how do you sort of work through that? So those are some of the burdens. And then more recently, to be honest, like the scrutiny is exhausting. That no matter how hard you work or how faithful you might want to be, or how many people you try to reach out to, or how you try to navigate it, there's always something wrong. And the Concordias are never pure enough. And so we've got to start our own purer than pure. And that, to be honest, is exhausting. And I got to tell you that was probably more recently the biggest burden of it all. When you just, at some point, you just get really tired of always having to defend yourself, or always having to, you wish that people could see all the good that you're doing. So I'll just close it with that. That's a little bit of the blessings and burdens, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Really good points, all of them. And maybe starting back on your point about blessings, I have no way of knowing whether this is true. Maybe Nicole Muth could, as an educator, could verify this. I think, though, that college kids are at as almost an impressionable time in their lives as anybody, except for maybe newborns, right? And this may not be true, but what is certainly true is, they're coming from home, they're on their own for the first time, they're making big decisions about what they want to be or who they want to marry, and this independence that accompanies that. And it's really I think, Ryan, you described it as kind of almost a sort of a desperate opportunity for us in campus ministry, opportunity for radical changes sometimes in students' lives. And say something about that. But Ryan, lead into it maybe with a discussion about the campus pastor as umpire. I was intrigued by how you put that as like an umpire to Little League game. That was a metaphor you used last time when I spoke to you.
Yeah. Well, on this particular campus, we all have our different kind of arenas that we work in. I mean, I look at James and Steve and Jeff, and I was basically a young guy compared to those guys. I mean, you've been around forever, and now it feels like I'm the old guy. I mean, I had hair when I got to campus, and now I don't anymore. But one of the cool things about this particular campus is because it's in such a small town. There are students that will come over once or twice a week to have food at our house. The students will knock on the door at 10 o'clock at night and say, "Can we camp in your backyard?" There's just, because it's not a commuter campus at all, basically you're invited into their home. Concordia is their home. And so you get to be as much all things to all those students as you can be. I mean, some of them need somewhat of a dad, someone needs somewhat of a pastor, whatever it might be. And you get to do that. And like Jeff said, that some of that is really, really exhausting. You're on call 24 hours a day for 9 straight months. And it's a really good thing, but it's a really hard thing too. Pat, what you were talking about, the idea of, and I completely agree with Jeff, and I suppose Randy and Ryan and James kind of feel the same way too, is like this, like being an umpire is what I was talking about the other night with you, I guess, and trying to allow it to be a really fun game, but constantly you have the parents that, and not all parents, just a few that they're always in your ear. They're always in the background, and they're always saying something, and it just doesn't feel very often like they say, good job, you're doing great. Now, there is one parent on here I know that Hayner, whose son goes there, and so he's been very positive for campus, and that's been really good. But at times, it gets hard. But I know on this particular campus, man, it's just a great blessing. Just knowing that they're going to grow, that we're going to work with them, and if they don't know Jesus better by the time they graduate, then we failed, and that's just what we got to do.
Thank you, Ryan. It's I love that image because I think you said it in an email that you could just deal with the kids. The game would be great, right? It'd just be fun and the kids would be great, but you have to you have to deal with the reality of the spectators and their scrutiny. And I'd like to just talk a little bit more about that. And Ryan, you had kind of a unique role at CUAA because first of all, you were campus pastor. That's why you came and did a fantastic job in that role. But then you moved over into administration and you kind of were our liaison to the churches and districts as well. So say a little bit more about that relationship between the campus and the broader church.
Yeah, it's a great question. In so many ways, when I think about campus ministry, it's already been echoed here. A blessing of it is that it's almost like every day is a Sunday, at least for 9 months, right? And then, it gets a little quieter this time of year. But the intensity and the level of engagement for any of our campuses is so high every single day. You may have the student knocking on your door, you're having lunch with them, you're worshiping together, you might be teaching them in class, cheering for them, etc. And then reflecting that to the greater church, right? To the capital C church. So I've thought often, how do we just tell our best story? How do we communicate often to our stakeholders? And there are many of them, right? It's parents, it's alumni, and it's the church that wants to know what's happening on their Concordia and Valpo campuses, and even far beyond, of course, all campus ministries. That can be a tricky thing at times, especially given some of the criticism that can easily come your way. So I found, at least in my role, moving from campus pastor into a more administrative role, I did have to think a little bit differently in that not every conversation I could approach it like the campus pastor. I wasn't the campus pastor. Randy was our campus pastor, and Steve was the campus pastor. So they could walk with students in a way where I might have had to have a more difficult conversation with a student, with a family, with a series of people, given my role in administration. So that took a little bit of time, but hopefully along the way, I had the opportunity to grow and mature in that. And ultimately, though, to see it for good, because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. Whether you're a faculty member, a staff member, a coach, or an administrator, you want to see students take a next step in their faith journey. Of course, you want to see them receive a degree, excel in the world. But for our Christian campuses, for our Lutheran universities, we want to see them hear the gospel and trust and believe in the gospel.
I'd like to look at this question a little bit more about the relationship of the church to the campuses a bit. And James, I'd be interested in your perspective on this from Valpo in just a moment. But let me lead into it for a moment with just a couple of quick stories that just now came to my mind. So I remember once meeting a family, a prospective student, sat down with them, and the mom was really unhappy. She'd just come from chapel, or she said, you guys don't talk about being Lutheran enough. And you just talk about being Christian. I said, well, what's the problem? I mean, Lutherans are Christians. It was just one of those dialogues where if you didn't use exactly the right language somehow, you weren't getting the job done that you were supposed to do. And that carries over to the second story where I had some Wyoming district pastors. I was the campus pastor in the Wyoming district, right? A couple of years. So I didn't know any of these guys because it had been a long time, but I accepted an invitation to come out and just talk to them. Just talk to, I don't know, it was like 8 pastors up in Casper. And this is a very conservative district, right? This is a very conservative district. And they wanted to talk about worship at Concordia. And they were simply adamant that we should do either matins or morning prayer every day. And I said, guys, I'm just going to respectfully have to disagree with you. That we do that. We do Steve's old friend Matten's quite a lot, actually. And you know, but we're not going to do it every day. We're just not going to do it every day. So there's some in the crowd, Ryan, with these expectations in our ear rather constantly saying, if you're not doing it this way, you're not being Lutheran enough. And I'm sure folks at Valpo heard that kind of criticism, not only about worship, but about all kinds of things for a long time. So tell us a little bit, James, about Valpo and church relations, and then maybe some of the rest of you can weigh in on that from your perspective.
Sure. Thanks for the question. So just to put it on the table, Valpo is an independent university. It was founded 150 years ago as a Lutheran university by members primarily of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, both clergy and lay. And one of the things that colors, so let me back up and say that currently Valpo is very, very interested in its Lutheran identity from the administration on down. I work with a vice president for mission for whom his graduate work was the question of Lutheran identity in higher education. So we talk about this all the time. That being said, because we're an independent university, and because I have my pastoral colleague, there are two campus university pastors at Valpo. My campus colleague is rostered in the ELCA. You know, in some constituencies, the other pastor isn't Lutheran because they're, you know, coming from a denomination that some in the Missouri Synod consider to have strayed from the Lutheran path. So that's a dynamic that certainly is present constantly when I'm around people from the Missouri Synod. That being said, we do, I think, a really great job of placing sort of Lutheran theology in a larger Christian context, drawing a constituency of students into leadership, the majority of whom end up being Lutheran, and navigating. I mean, the folks that like Valpo, and the people that don't like Valpo, for the most part, leave us alone, except for every now and then. So.
Yeah, they do now because they're focused on the Concordias, I suppose.
Right. I'm sorry, and I'm sorry about that, Randy.
Yeah, and the reality is, for those who aren't aware, I mean, our campus pastors are certainly aware. I mean, the screws are getting tighter and tighter, right? The Lutheran identity issue is front and center. It was at the last convention, and now all of our schools are subject to, well, Jeff called it scrutiny. I'll call it close scrutiny or extra scrutiny now, and in a way that is intended to have teeth, right? Not just complaint, but looking for impact and reaction. Guys, Sue, I don't know if you can bring something to this question. I want to ask you a question in a moment about international students, but just while we're on this topic, anybody want to weigh in on that reality of Lutheran identity? Go ahead, Jeff, and then we'll go to Steve next.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, what does identity mean? Of course, we think about doctrinal identity and unity, which is important, very, very important. The Lutheran University is, you know, the church is our mother, both historically back to the universities of Europe, which sprung forth from the cathedrals, and also in the Missouri Synod. The church is our mother in terms of we are formed by the Missouri Synod to train church workers. So, and you know, you got to respect your mother, you know, even though you might not always agree with her. So I think doctrinal unity is important, but I think there's also another story that goes along with this, which is, you know, I talk about three different ones. One is in the DNA of the Lutheran University is this idea that knowledge is a gift for everyone. Both the knowledge of the gospel is for everyone, but knowledge, learning, is a gift for everyone. And that, of course, ties in with our theology of vocation. The other thing which people don't maybe think about is that innovation is part of our university, our educational DNA. Public education emerged out of Reformation Germany. Public education. The idea that you would standardize curriculum, that you would train teachers, that the government would pay for it, that you would develop these church orders, that would help, regulate things. This was a new thing, and that was a Lutheran thing. So innovation in terms of the printing press, innovation in terms of the catechism, new languages. We invented new languages. I mean, that's pretty innovative, right? So innovation is actually also part of the Lutheran identity for a university. And then the third thing is the immigrant experience. That when in River Forest, when they came here in the 1800s, largely German-speaking parents, but the kids were bilingual, and they knew two things. They knew that faith and education were the path forward. Those are the two things they knew. And that's sort of repeating itself if in certain places, hopefully in certain terms of our Spanish-speaking students. So the immigration experience, the idea of innovation, and the idea that knowledge is a gift for everyone that's Lutheran identity as well. But I don't know how much we get a chance to talk about that. Sorry for the speech here, guys.
No, it's a great point. And that, I mean, because we do tend to isolate on sort of not even doctrinal questions. Usually, they're typically more questions about practice, and even more specifically, often about worship or the role of women, and then that's Lutheran identity is reduced to kind of a few of those questions. Steve, you had something to say about this too. Go ahead.
Well, a lot of it, and worship is an easy identifiable thing, and unity versus uniformity. I mean, that's a question that the Synod needs to think about a little more closely, in my opinion. Depending on which district you're in, things are more or less done. And when we start getting the scrutiny about vestments and about things like that, I wonder really if the synodical leadership understands the great variety of students that we have. Kid who's been LCMS his whole life and he's only done contemporary worship. Kid who's been LCMS, and we've talked about this, and they know matins, and I think we have to do both. I think there's a responsibility to kind of reach out to both, and maybe even further with students who have not had a Lutheran experience. So, what districts and district presidents talk about, and the Synod as a whole, I think sometimes we're the lightning rod for that, because we're so easily identifiable, but the Synod hasn't figured this out yet. And so if Congregation A can have a variety of worship styles, and the Concordias cannot, I don't understand how we reconcile that. So to me, that's, I don't know, maybe a frustration, but
yeah, indeed. Concordias, our Concordias, Valpo too, they're not congregations, right? And they're not seminaries, right? They're neither of those things. They're something very different, and it becomes very problematic when folks want to see things maybe in a very specific sort of way. Go ahead, Ryan, and then I'm going to ask you a question, Sue, so hang on.
Yeah, really quick. I think one of the things when maybe people want to talk to me about the stuff that we do here, and I mean, if you're a Concordia, you're just going to be conservative. I mean, that's just who we are. We are a conservative body. But when guys will talk to me, I'll say, basically, I say, like, what you do in your church is like you have that's the church. You're planted there. But I said, this is almost like what we're doing here is Paul with his tent making shops. It's we're working with the people. We're working with a much bigger crowd, and prayerfully we're going to send them to your churches someday, or to make their own churches. But we're tent making here, and we're trying to figure that out together. And those are the things I try and it's just so hard sometimes, but that's the best we can do.
Well, and you'd also said something about the fact that you don't have a cradle to grave ministry, right? You have 4 years working with all kinds of students. Some died in the wool, Lutherans, and others who don't even have a clue about what that means. And that might include, by the way, international students, Sue. And that's what I want to ask you something about. Say something about your work with international students, and maybe help us Stan, appreciate a little bit about the different spiritual needs of international students on our campuses,
Yeah.
others as well.
Yeah, well, it's a great joy for me to be able to, I don't directly work on any campus, although I probably have the most direct contact with our international students at Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, because I hang out with them on Fridays when they have a barbecue. But my work is with those who work with international students. And so I'm thrilled that at Concordia St. Paul, Anna Gruen is actively reaching out to the hundreds of Indian graduate students that are Hindus mostly, although one of them is Christian, and sharing the gospel with them, becoming friends, connecting families to them from the community, and also trying to connect the Concordia students to these students. But the ministry that we do with International Student Ministry is also just so different on each campus. At public university campuses like Purdue, there are 2 LCMS students connected to the Lutheran Student Center there who are reaching out to Taiwanese graduate students and reaching out in a variety of ways through hospitality, through offering Bible study, through offering English support. And then at University of Missouri State University in Springfield, there is a Lutheran campus ministry there that doesn't have any synodically trained leadership right now, but the students are leading it themselves, and they've decided they want to be more intentional about reaching out to international students. So 3 of them came to our International Student Ministry Equipping Conference in Norman, Oklahoma in May. So there's just a variety of ways that the international students come. Some of them are Lutherans and they want to, they'll jump right in. Others have never heard the gospel before, never met a Christian before, and they need Bible studies that are not typical Lutheran Bible studies, but are ones that don't assume that they have any background at all in God's word, and start with what is the Bible and Genesis and creation and how did people rebel against God, and perhaps not using as much of our good Lutheran terminology the first time through so that they can understand it better. So those are just, that's just a touch. I could go on and on, but
absolutely. Yeah. It's a wonderful thing. And I think, we have students who come to us from near and far, from all around the world, right? From all around the world. Right. And we have the opportunity to share the love of Jesus with them. And they pay us tuition for that,
That's right. Yeah.
What a deal, right? What a deal. And yet again, back to the point about scrutiny, there are those who say, what, these schools should be for Lutheran schools for Lutheran kids. And some people really, they just believe that. They believe that. But we have this spectacular opportunity to engage them. And Evan, you've done that as a faculty member. Say something about, that role as connecting to campus ministry through the classroom.
So the first 4 years I was an adjunct, I had primarily Lutheran students that were preparing for professional church work. And then I transitioned to teaching mostly the Christian doctrine class for nursing students at Concordia Ann Arbor. So I had an interesting perspective of how to change how I teach doctrine. And, teaching the Lutheran teacher diploma and pre-sem students, and there's this certain every day there's this vibrant dialogue and discussion and these questions, and then have a nursing students who have I need to pass this class because it's a requirement to, this is something new, or I'm a Lutheran at a Lutheran university, of course I know all this, all in the same class, and really having to figure out how to bring conversation to a spot that fits all of those people in the nursing class. And then more recently, I've started to realize more how hungry these students are for relationships, where I would generally just kind of start the class, get through the material, and the class would be over, and I'd make sure they were prepared for the test. This last semester, I started every class with a set of questions that I had. I've got these, a bundle that almost looks like playing cards. Every card has a easy question, a medium question, or a hard question. They're really from youth ministry kind of stuff. And I did it the first couple classes, and then I started another one, and I would just say, do an easy, medium, or hard. And then the like the fourth class in, I said, all right, we're going to start talking. And one of the students raised her hand. She goes, well, what about the questions? I want to learn about everybody in the classroom. And I said, well, you see them all the time. She goes, I never talk to anybody. And what became fascinating to me is teaching the religion class became not just a conversation from me to them, but to see the students talk to one another. And some of that's just teaching dynamics, and experienced teachers know how to do that. But for me as a parish pastor, what it made me realize is how much more I needed to do in my own parish of making sure I was creating opportunities for conversation among people. My own Bible study teaching and the way I teach 8th grade, it's really changed over the 11 years to be much more bringing the doctrine and the relationship and that sense of community into a triangle, where if I find myself ever leaning more to one of those 3 points, I'm falling off the chair. It's not as stable. But if we have both the meat of the doctrine, the building of relationship, and not just the relationship between me and them, but making sure they're talking to one another, what a vibrancy in the classroom. And then to see that just changing the way I'm as a parish pastor has been fun to see.
Well, and you reinforce obviously the work of people like Randy on that Ann Arbor campus. And we've been blessed there to have Randy not only as our campus pastor, but you teach classes, and Randy is at heart an evangelist. I mean, he's an evangelist. And I know that in the run up to the election for synodical presidency last year, I was just observing how few adult confirmations and baptisms we have in the Lutheran Church in Missouri Synod. I mean, it's such a small number. I don't remember it right now, but let's let it suffice to say not many, right? And yet you place that alongside what has happened at Concordia Ann Arbor, where, how many, Randy, in the last several years, students have come to the waters of baptism?
I think it's been about 106.
106.
Some people have exaggerated to 120, but
yeah,
my
well,
numbers are close to
over 100,
100.
and interestingly, that has been the focus of some of that scrutiny. Like, oh, you must, Randy, you must be doing something wrong to have that many students.
Lutherans don't have that many baptisms. What are you compromising on? Yeah, when we talk about Lutheran identity, baptism, sacramental theology, I mean, that should be our identity. It's not in the outward things necessarily, but just the preaching of the word. And for me, I think I relate to them. I wasn't raised in the church either. It was after a good friend of mine was murdered that a youth leader came and shared the gospel with me, and I came here and to learn more about Jesus. But I still have the stench of hell in my nostrils, and I really look at it like what Paul said, to do the work of an evangelist, especially with this generation, Gen Z. Talk about nuns and the idea that I wanted to cultivate here too was the idea of belonging before believing. That it's estimated about a quarter of all Gen Z youth are living within single parent households, and the other ones might be stepfather or whatever like that. But to be able to get a sense of you're loved, you're received, we want you here. So some ways I'm the campus pastor, but I also play crazy uncle, doing karaoke and all that stuff, but making those connections so that we can connect them with Christ.
Well, I certainly am grateful for you and for all of you for what you've done, what you're still doing in campus ministry, and that extraordinary opportunity. We didn't get to it, James, about student leadership development, right? You're preparing students on campus and for the future. I don't know if you want to say a word or two about that as we wrap up here.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, at the center of the campus ministry at Valpo is student leadership. I need to acknowledge that we are profoundly privileged. Our campus ministry is really, really well endowed, such that we can offer almost 50 scholarships a year to students who are saying that they're interested in not necessarily full-time church work, but a vibrant life of the church. And out of that, then we foster a leadership team that the chapel employs in a variety of ways. And again, we employ about 50 students every year doing a variety of things, from worship leadership and organizing to peer ministers. And that peer-to-peer ministry. Patrick, you made the point that it wasn't the pastor who connected with you. It's that peer-to-peer ministry that makes the difference, because I don't have Randy's personality, but I got students who do, that are able to make those kinds of connections.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it really is profoundly powerful. It's such a extraordinary ministry, extraordinary time in young people's lives. And we're so grateful for the chance to talk to you all about it today. Mark, I think we're getting close to the end of our time. I don't know if you wanted to say some concluding thoughts or.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for a great panel discussion. You guys brought up a lot of, gals brought up a lot of things I wasn't even thinking about. So I really appreciate the variety of topics. It wasn't just campus ministry, but from the dynamics of having people criticize or critique all the time, that pressure versus I really like the last point too. And wow, what would every campus pastor do with an endowed amount of money to go out and be able to hire 50 college students to work for you in all different capacities? If the synod was thinking about these things, 106 baptisms might turn into 212 baptisms. Then we really might be not doing things right. But yeah, I think the key takeaway is when you bring Jesus incarnationally, especially this age when these kids need relationships. And in this world, it's so fractured. I was talking to somebody the other day. Maybe I was watching the documentary in the Brat Pack. The idea that high school and college age kids just don't have that community that we all did when we grew up. We all rode our bikes in the neighborhood, and now kids are playing Xbox by themselves with a headset with 4 other kids they can't see, and they live in these silos. And the campus ministry is a great place to sort of break those silos down and build relationships and to make it a home. So I love the idea of being before believing, because being in a campus that is so Christ-centered and that's sacramental in its nature will lead people to Jesus, and that's what leads people to believe. And it's not wrong to believe before you are be either, but not everybody sort of is in that way of operating. So I just want to say thank you again to each of you for your time and your sharing your experience, sharing your story in the campus ministry realm of things. And it's my prayer that as a Missouri Synod Lutheran, we learn how to dialogue better so we can work together better for the sake of not our own little silos or little egos, but for the sake of the Pat Ferrys who aren't Pat Ferry yet, for the sake of the Reed Lessings who aren't Reed Lessing yet, for the sake of the nuns and the kids who have been raised in a Lutheran school their whole life. I mean, I can look back in my life. I mean, how many times was I in Pat Ferry's office asking about important life decisions, which really weren't that important at the time, but in my world as a 19, 20, 21-year-old, my freshman year, he was a basketball coach. He probably remembers this. I had a heart issue that was, they said I was never going to play basketball again, and I was going to, have to go under the knife on Christmas Eve my freshman year. And so Pat Ferry was a huge part of my life then. So helping me walk through and think through, don't get too far ahead of, everything. And I grew up again in a church, pastor's kid. But I needed a Pat Ferry, and he wasn't the campus pastor then. But he was my advisor. He was my basketball coach. And eventually, his brother-in-law became my doctor father. So it's just a neat, unique, and important ministry in our church body. So again, thank you all for being a part of this discussion, and continue to pray for our Concordia system, and not just Concordia system, but beyond, the public school system and Valpo, just all in the high schools. We have a lot of people doing great work in high schools and even public high schools. Campus ministry is so big, and we need to really lean into taking the gospel into kids' lives. So I'll end with the Lord's Prayer. One note, we're going to take off for sure July and maybe August as well. So if you're not already signed up, sign up on the link, your email, you will get the recording of this. You also get the updates of the next ones coming out. So I'll be working this summer on filling slots for maybe August, but definitely we will be back after Labor Day. So, and then Ben and I can talk too. And thank you, Ben, for always being the guy who connects us. So you are awesome at your job too. And thanks again, Dr. Ferry, for moderating a great panel discussion. So let's end with the Lord's Prayer and then have a great rest of your day and week. We pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.